Welcome to the fourth in a series of presentations about the predictive power of eclipse paths. This is Bill Meridian speaking to you from Vienna, Austria. The title of this presentation is Eclipses of the Saudi Arabian Situation. Mundane astrology and eclipses. Charles James said that breadth is essential in mundane astrology. What that means is that no one event or one horoscope is going to precipitate a major change. So if we have an eclipse, let's say, occurring at 15 degrees of the fixed signs, it will only affect a country or a culture if numerous horoscopes are set off. In other words, if there are scads of historical charts with important planets at 15 fixed and there's an eclipse there, you can expect a major change in that country or culture. Mundane horoscopes consist of base charts and modifiers. Base charts are most of the charts you will see in Nick Campion's World Horoscopes or in Mark Penfield's books. For example, the base charts for the USA, Charles and I agreed, were the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation used by my old friend David Solti, and the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown. Any other charts that are in my USA file are considered to be modifiers. That is, they are secondary in nature to the major charts. So, for example, in Russia, there is Prince Rurik coming to power, the establishment of the House of Romanov. Then there is the fall of the House of Romanov and the subsequent communist government. Those would be base charts for that culture. And as Charles was fond of saying, the correct chart is the one that you can make accurate predictions with. We are going to use principles of mundane astrology to analyze the Saudi Arabian situation. It is now February of 2015. The king has died, oil prices are very low, and the neighboring country, Yemen, has become unstable. And we're going to see how an old eclipse chart is being set off. Now, I lived in Abu Dhabi for 14 years. I'm very familiar with the history. And what we tend to have in the reference books are horoscopes of the modern nation states. But there are horoscopes that date way back. The problem with them is that they have no days. But we can use eclipses to find those days. And let me start with the UAE as an example. On August 2nd, 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, but he also did threaten the UAE. This is the horoscope for that eclipse, and we see the lunar eclipse, if you remember, was at 14 Aquarius, square Pluto at 15 Scorpio, and square Mars at 16 Taurus. Quite a wicked T-square. But that lunar eclipse did not really afflict directly the horoscopes of Kuwait or the UAE. Now here we have the United Arab Emirates when the 7 Emirates joined together December 2nd, 1971. We could say that Vesta at 15 Aquarius was afflicted, so the country's security was threatened. But other than that, I probably would have missed that had I not been living in the UAE and found earlier charts. Now let's look at Kuwait, June 19th, 1961 in Kuwait City. And again, we don't see any real direct connections between that eclipse chart and the national chart. There are earlier horoscopes for both nations. Sheikh Zayed, God rest his soul, came to power on August 6, 1966 at about 7:30 a.m. The time comes from a British agent who was there at the time. He told me by 7:30 in the morning it was all over. Shak Bout, the previous ruler, realized he had absolutely no support in the country. He was flown out for a short time and then brought back and lived there as an honorary retired citizen for the rest of his life. But there was no violence. The Bani Yas tribe, which is a dominant tribe in the area, settled the area now known as Abu Dhabi in 1761. Kuwait according to a Muslim scholar at the library at the Islamic Cultural Center, stated that Kuwait had its beginning when the locals united in the face of raiders. Roaming bands would plunder the area. They knew they were coming, so they showed a united front. And when the raiders saw that the area now known as Kuwait would not be easy pickings, they simply rode off. That occurred in 1757. Now recall that Saddam Hussein threatened both countries. He only invaded one, but he threatened both. Now, the following charts that I'm going to show you were hit hard by the eclipse. The Zayed government horoscope, look at the sun, it's at 13 Leo. The day for, it is known as Accession Day, the date that Sheikh Zayed took the leadership. The eclipse was on the national birthday. The eclipse was August 2nd, and the eclipse was August 6th. The invasion was August 2nd. So that told you, the minute I saw this in June of 1990, I predicted there would be some violence there, and then when Saddam Hussein lined up on the border, I knew what was going to happen. Now, as we know, 15 fixed is 45 and 135 to the world points. 0 Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Look at Saturn, 29 Pisces, 08. And there's the moon at 5 Aries. So the eclipse would pull in anything that is at 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. I do have a birth date for Zayed that I'm not using here that showed his sun at 0 Aries. So if that is an accurate time, and it is very speculative at best, then his personal chart was also pulled in. Now, here is how we use eclipses to come up with a horoscope when we don't have a day, but we do have a year. I set up all the eclipse charts for the year 1761 for the capital, which is El Ain, but here I've shifted it to Abu Dhabi. Not that there'll be much difference, because there won't be. They're very close. They're an hour and a half drive apart. And we see that that eclipse fell where but at 14 Taurus, conjunct Mars at 13 Taurus, and the asteroid Sirius at 15 Scorpio, Neptune's at 19 Leo, Chiron is at 19 Aquarius. So here we do have a direct hit, and Pluto is at 29 Sagittarius, close enough to 0 Capricorn. So this chart, if you were scanning a group of horoscopes to see if the eclipse hit, this chart would pop out. So this is probably the earliest chart I have for modern Abu Dhabi. Let's do the same thing for Kuwait. Now Kuwait, this chart is February 18, 1757. This eclipse took place at 0 degrees of Pisces. But look at Mars and Saturn, they are at 14 and 15 Aquarius respectively. We have Jupiter at 18 Scorpio, and we have Neptune at 11 Leo. So now all three of these horoscopes we can see were directly hit by those eclipses. Let's apply the same technique to Saudi Arabia and the current situations. The first Saudi state was founded in 1744. This period was marked by conquest of neighboring areas and by religious zeal. At its height, the first modern Saudi state included most of the, well, it's not modern, but the first Saudi state included most of the territory of modern-day Saudi Arabia. And raids by Saud's allies and followers reached into Yemen, Oman, Syria, and Iraq. We do not have a date, so we rely on a technique from Charles Jane. We set up an eclipse horoscope for the capital. This is the solar eclipse from the previous lecture that is going to occur September 13th in 2015. And I'm pointing out how Mercury at 15 Libra, the midheaven at 16 Aries, and Uranus close enough 19 Aries are in line with the two lunar eclipses that occurred in the autumn of 2014 and the upcoming one in April of 2015. They are at 1416 Aries Libra. Now let's go one step beyond to the Saudi eclipse. This is the chart I've selected for October 6, 1744. Look at where the eclipse is, 13 degrees of Libra. This degree was conjoined and opposed by the eclipses that occurred in October of 2014 and the upcoming one in April of 2015. And let me briefly just give you that date so it'll be very exact. That eclipse will be on April 4th at 14 Libra 24. And where does that fall here? Right on top of this eclipse. Now, how do I know that this eclipse is the one amongst those that occurred during that year? Well, first of all, 13 Libra, given the current situation, jumped right out at me. Second of all, if I did not know that, I would say, well, the eclipse is square Neptune, and it is an oil state, and if you know that area, it is Neptunian in nature. And if you look at Mars, 17 Leo 54, Pluto 17 Scorpio 41. Well, warfare followed as the people within that area pushed out into the surrounding areas. And also I could go into, we could say that well, punishments there for crimes are very severe, and so on. So natally, note the close Mars-Pluto square, the eclipse squares Neptune, and Jupiter equals Uranus-Neptune. That really did it for me. This is likely descriptive of the sudden rise in oil wealth. And in 2014-2015, the oil prices declined, the Saudi king died, and Yemen has become unstable on the Saudi border. One immediately notes that the October 2014, April 2015 lunar eclipses are conjunct and opposite the eclipse of 1744. And the Uranus-Pluto square has been afflicting this eclipse. So what can we expect going forward? Well, the next eclipse will, of course, fire this eclipse up again. But Uranus has now moved on. The Pluto-Uranus square will be exact in March next month. So from April forward, we can expect this situation to wane in influence. We can expect this situation to start returning to normal. So it will be essentially a big deal through April and probably into May, but only Pluto will be left squaring this eclipse degree, and I don't think, based on my experience, that that will be enough to cause a major upheaval in the kingdom. So let's now review the eclipse principles that we've utilized today. Number one, an eclipse governs or has influence over any events that occur near the eclipse. So, in 1744, if I opened up a Carvel stand in the middle of Saudi Arabia, if a camel was born, if a horse was born in Kentucky in the United States, if somebody started a club or a business in New York, all around this time, they would all be related to this eclipse of 1744. And changes in the eclipse chart would then be reflected by changes in the entities that I just rattled off. That is why this works. So there was an eclipse at that time, and the Saud family came to power. It was the foundation of the modern state. So therefore it falls under the rulership of this eclipse, as do many other events that occurred at that time. 2. If one does not have a date for an event, take the eclipse that occurred near the event and set up eclipse horoscopes for that place. 3. Select the one that best fits. In this case, the nation and the culture. 4. Time future events with it. If you can't do some accurate timing with it, then there's something wrong. And let me just refer to my book now, Predictive Power of Eclipse Paths. I point out that in an article in the Irish journal, Bill Sheeran, an Irish astrologer, pointed out that when the Irish rebellion started, when the IRA was given birth, there was a very violent lunar eclipse like this one. And he took that chart and he did solar arc directions to the angles of the chart, and he got significant events occurring, which proves that the angles in this chart can be relied upon to make future predictions. So I hope you have enjoyed and learned something from this presentation. There'll be another one fairly shortly. And if you don't have a copy of Predictive Power of Eclipse Paths, there's a picture of it. You can go to BillMeridian.com, and we accept PayPal, credit cards, and checks. Thank you for listening. Talk to you again soon.